All right, welcome to another episode of Theology Applied. I'm your host, Pastor Joel Webbon with Right Response Ministries. In this episode, I am privileged to welcome back to the show a regular guest, A.D. Robles. We're going to be talking about top-down revival rather than just grassroots bottom-up. We want to work towards revival one regenerate heart at a time. But if we look historically and we look biblically, God often uses leaders, a few leaders, to shape the whole populace. This is what God has done. We should not merely ask the question what God can do. We should ask the question, what does God do? That's the kind of conversation that we're having in this episode. We're also, in light of that, talking a lot about elite theory. What is elite theory? How does that work? How do a few individuals, for good or for evil, shape an entire society? Because it does happen, and we need to be aware of that theory, that system, and who some of these people are. Tune in now.
Applying God's Word to every aspect of life. This is Theology Applied.
All right, welcome to another episode of Theology Applied. I am your host, Pastor Joel Webbon with Right Response Ministries, and today I have joining me for the 1,457th time, A.D. Robles. He is a regular on the show. He might as well be a co-host. A.D., thanks for coming on.
I'm glad to be here. It's awesome. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. All right, so what we wanted to talk about, we're just going to really keep this conversation just kind of organic, and just kind of where you guys get to be a fly on the wall and hear kind of the conversation that AD and I would just have if we were talking on the phone. We want to talk about basically how did we get to this place? How did things get so bad? If the nation's going to change positively, if we're going to have a revival or reformation or any of those things, is it going to be grassroots? Is it going to be bottom up, or is it going to be top down? A lot of guys within, evangelicalism and even the Reformed tribe, I would argue, especially within Reformed evangelicalism, they sometimes behave and speak as though there's only one way to change a culture, society, a nation, and that's bottom up. That basically it has to be an organic preaching of the gospel through the sphere of the church, not the state, not political rulers or media or institutions or influential people in other areas of life. No, it's got to be only the church, gospel preachers, and that the Holy Spirit has to move in such a way that the gospel preaching is efficacious to the point where you have regenerate hearts that account for 50% of the population plus one, so that you can then win your democratic elections and put better men in office. And just for the record, I'm not against that. And for all practical purposes, that's what I'm praying towards. That's what I'm working towards as a local pastor, as a Christian man, as a father, as a husband. In my day-to-day life, I'm working towards doing the work of an evangelist, hoping to see people come to faith in Jesus Christ through the preaching of the gospel and the work of the Spirit, and that we would have more and more Christians, and that if we have more salt and light, that would make a difference in our world. Amen. Yes and amen. So that's true. I just don't think it's the whole truth. I think that there's also not just bottom-up revival, if I could coin that phrase, but I do think that biblically speaking and historically speaking, throughout this gospel age, these past 2,000 years of church history, I would argue that bottom-up revival is legitimate, and it's what we should pray towards. But top-down revival seems to be not only possible, but it seems to actually be the more common occurrence, is that Israel sucks. And it's not just that Israel, through the preaching of the priests, that 50% of the population plus one become regenerate, and then they use their democratic vote to switch kings. No, it's Israel sucks, the king sucks, God kills that king, he puts Josiah in his place. The people aren't righteous, but Josiah says, well, even if you're not righteous on the inside, in a true regenerate sense, you're going to behave as though you're righteous, whether you like it or not, because I'm going to kill you if you practice idolatry, and I'm going to rip down the high places, and we will worship Yahweh. And then the law of the Lord begins to function in that tutoring sense. The law doesn't regenerate anyone, but it does begin, as it's executed by the king in a righteous way, the law begins to shape the consciences of men and paint a more conducive context and backdrop for real preaching of the Messiah. And then people's hearts over time do change and Israel improves. What do you think, AD? Is that crazy?
Well, I mean, I think it's sometimes it's hard for me to put myself back when I believed essentially this kind of bottom up, the people change and they get better rulers and stuff like that. It's hard for me to put my mind back in that space because when you read the Bible, that is not the presentation that we get. Not to say that can't happen and that shouldn't happen and that's not a way that things change. But in the Bible, especially like the book of Kings, right? You get this list of the kings and you get a short couple paragraphs about what they do, whether they were good or bad. And it's like you get the king and then the people follow what the king is doing each and every time, whether it's a good king or a bad king.
Right.
And that is what's presented to us, right? And so once you see that and you recognize that, it's hard to put your mind back in the spot where that can't happen. That's not crazy at all. It makes perfect sense that when King Asa comes and says, okay, well, we're getting rid of the male prostitutes or the sodomites. We're going to get rid of them all. We're going to cut down the Asherah poles. We're going to do all these things. It makes sense that the people are like, well, I mean, I'm sure some of them still wanted to do that stuff, but they didn't do it as much as they used to. Makes perfect sense because there were no Asherah poles anymore. There were no sodomites anymore. So it's not crazy, but it's wild. Maybe we can talk a little bit about why this became sort of like a foreign concept, but this is the way the Bible presents this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. What do you think? Like, because it really is foreign. Our brains are just, I don't know. We've been hardwired as kind of modern Western, democracy people, Americans, Westerners, and so we read our presuppositions into the Bible, and we really think it's there. It's funny. I saw somebody, or one of our mutuals offline was saying. He said, it's funny that staunch cessationists, I think of like the John MacArthur camp, and I'm a cessationist, so are you, but guys who like, the kind of guys who would not just be cessationists, but would host, a cessationist conference annually, those kind of guys. It's funny that they believe there's no new revelation, that it ended in the first century with the dying of the apostles, except there was a window of the gift of prophecy and new revelation coming back into play in 1776, or what is it? It's 1777, I think, but with what I'm getting at is they almost, they don't say this, I'm being facetious, but they almost give off the impression that the Constitution is actually infallible, that it's like inscripturated.
Yeah, there was even a man who put a video out that was titled something like, or described something like Christian nationalists say that the Constitution is dead. This is dangerous and troubling and concerning. And here's my biblical response. Well, what could the biblical response be to that? We're talking about a political system that was created, and of course it drew from principles in Scripture. But the Constitution itself, what would be the biblical response there? Like, talk about reading your presuppositions into the Bible. The Bible does not give us the U.S. Constitution. There's a foundation there, of course, and of course we understand there's some principles that were drawn from there, but it's not. It sounds so stupid to say, but some people really do treat it as if it is a point of orthodoxy. It's a point of faithfulness, and if you're not 100% pro-Constitution, because that's what people are saying, If someone says the Constitution is dead, that must mean they're not being faithful to the Constitution. And it becomes almost a point of Christian orthodoxy,
right,
where it's like, well, that's dangerous biblically. How could that possibly be the case? I'm pro-Constitution, so that doesn't even fit most of the people that are in this discussion. But even if you did say, I don't know about that Constitution, it's not the greatest, it's not a point of piety. It doesn't make any sense to make it so.
Right.
But
and that's not even what guys are saying. They're not, I don't hear really anyone saying, I don't like the Constitution. What they're saying is not prescriptive. We should overthrow the Constitution. They're saying in a descriptive sense, they're not saying the Constitution is bad. They're saying the Constitution is dead. And there is a massive difference between those two statements. It's not the Constitution is bad. It's that the Constitution in many regards is a beautiful, wonderful, biblical document in many regards, biblical principles baked throughout the whole pie. The problem is that our nation doesn't abide by it. It's like, well, you guys want to overthrow the Constitution. No, we don't. It has been overthrown for a very long time. How did the Constitution work out for you in 2020 when they said churches couldn't gather, right? It protected us, right? Our rights were...
Right.
Oh, wait, no, they weren't. What about when they mandated that our military be injected with a foreign substance with no long-term testing? The Constitution, it worked for them, right? No, it did not. The Constitution is great. The problem is we're not saying Constitution bad. We're saying Constitution dead. And there is a massive difference between those two statements.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between the two statements. Obviously, and that's kind of what I was saying. That doesn't apply to me, and it doesn't apply to hardly anyone to say that the Constitution's bad. It might apply to someone, and even if it did apply to someone, it's still not a point of piety. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, we're not even saying that, but even if we were, it doesn't even matter as far as Christian piety is concerned.
Right.
But I think you're right, though, to say, and I was going to say this before I forget, that I think the reason why we read the Book of Kings and we read other parts of Scripture, like even pagan nations too, like Nineveh repents from the top to the bottom, and but it started with the king repenting and commanding certain things, and so and all the people, all the pagans there said, well, I guess we're doing this now, and so they all did it too. So we get presented this again and again and again. God blesses a people with a certain ruler, a certain, king, whatever, and the people follow his lead. This is what we're presented. The reason why we decode that into meaning something different, or we're just maybe just disregarding it, is because of how we were trained as Americans. Like, as far as America, when I was a kid, I was taught essentially that a king is the worst possible kind of ruler. Like, that's what you want to avoid at all costs. That's like the antithesis of good political leadership. It's the antithesis. So that's what I was taught. And a lot of kings are bad, right? Yes. So it's easy to make that case if you kind of cherry pick examples and stuff like that. And you can even do that with the Bible too. I've even heard Ron Paul, the libertarian prince, he used the Bible once and to talk about how kings would be bad for people. And there's that's true. When you have a bad king, that's very true. There's a lot of negative things that come with that. So it's easy to make that case, but it's not that simple. It's not really as easy as that. There's a lot more to that story than meets the eye. And so as Americans who grew up, I had civics class just like everybody else. I grew up in New England. I was taught, the Constitution was the greatest thing ever. And there was no way to improve it. I was taught all these things. And I think that's why when I read the Book of Kings, I don't notice how reforms are made. You know what I mean? I think maybe even the first time I noticed this was when I read a translation that called them King Asa's reforms. And that word reforms kind of triggered something in me. And it's like, he's making these good reforms by edict. He's just saying, I'm just doing these things.
This is what's happening.
He didn't ask the people, hey, let's have a referendum on this. Do you guys want to take the Asherah poles down or not? Like, he just made these reforms, and they were all objectively good reforms, and he just did it, and the people followed, and he probably had to do enforcement. He probably used his power to enforce these things. I mean, we see examples of that in Scripture too. We see Nehemiah, who makes reforms as well, but he also uses his authority and his power to force the people to change that don't want to change.
Right.
He makes examples of people. So we read that stuff, but I think sometimes our American civics training kind of overrides that a little bit sometimes. And that's why you get so many people that they freak out, they fly off the handle when you say, oh yeah, maybe a Protestant Franco wouldn't be so bad. Maybe a good version of a strong leader wouldn't be so bad. And all they hear is, oh, you want a dictator. You want Chairman Mao. You want Adolf Hitler. That's what you want. That's what they hear. Right. And it's like, well, I didn't say that, but I think it's like an inability to sort of think like in a reflective way about, maybe the training I got in, 10th grade civics class wasn't the end all be all of everything.
Right. Yeah. I think it's an inability to read the Bible without predisposed presuppositions and biases as a modern Westerner. It's that. but I think it's also an inability to not just to read the Bible without bias, but to read the room without bias. A lot of people, part of the reason why it sounds extreme, because that's ultimately what they're saying. They're saying it seems a bit extreme. That seems extreme. Well, the only reason it seems extreme is if you think that an American Caesar type person rising through the ranks, and again, not even prescribing it, but just describing that and articulating to say, this would have excesses and objective abuses. There would be things that were problems. But overall, on the whole, the Lord in his sovereignty could use this without us advocating for it or trying to make it happen, but God could make this happen, and it could be overall, in a general sense, a positive thing. If you think that's extreme, to call that extreme is really only happens one way, and it's by not recognizing that what we currently have is extreme. You think that alteration is extreme because you don't recognize how extreme the current status quo is. And what I'm saying by that is a lot of people still don't know what time it is. They don't understand how many millions of human beings are being slaughtered. They don't understand that we are, as a nation, exporting sodomy around the world. That's our greatest export. Our greatest export is perversion. You don't understand. You don't understand how extreme thing. You think that what we're describing is extreme because you don't realize that where we're currently sitting is extreme. Yeah. Like if we did get some American Caesar type guy, and let's say he's not even regenerate, right? Like a Cyrus figure that may have been saved, may have not been saved, or Nebuchadnezzar. Let's say that he utilizes Christian rhetoric, but he himself is not actually regenerate and a Christian himself. In the
I think
truest
that's
sense.
the most likely scenario, by the way.
Me too.
Just so you know.
Me too. Yeah. And I think he would probably come from, flyover country, right? Like Superman, he grows up in Kansas, right? It's hard to get more American than that, so he's some guy from Kansas or Oklahoma, or Mississippi, and he rises through the ranks, he was homeschooled probably, by his Christian parents, and he may not be a Christian himself, but he knows the Bible better than most people who are Christians, and he utilizes that language, and he says, here's the deal, we're going to clean up America. And by the time we get to this guy, whether it be a Barron Trump, or lots of different, fun speculations, but by the time you get to him, the nation is so degenerate that the majority of people are basically just saying, all right, man, like, get us out of this mess, whatever it takes. And so he comes in and he starts cracking eggs to make an omelet. And I'm not saying that cracking eggs is righteous. I'm not defending that. There would be objectively abuses and excesses that go beyond what the Bible would actually allow a civil ruler to do. Because I don't think that the Bible prescribes as the only righteous form of government a constitutional republic. That said, I'm not saying that the Bible says nothing about political forms of government, because I do think that the Bible does advocate for certain principles, like, for instance, representative government. But just for the record, I think there's a way of having a monarch, a king, with still forms of representative government, whether it be
of course there is.
The king has a set of lords that represent different regions and areas and people under their care. And can there be abuses of, like a feudal, lord system with lords and serfs, and some of those lords are abusive and they treat their serfs of course. But here's the deal. Can there be abuses in our sacred democracy? Yes. We are abusing 1 million children every single year by ripping them apart in their mother's womb and sucking them out with a vacuum cleaner. That's my point, is everybody who feels like what we're describing, we're not even advocating, we're just describing. Everyone who feels like what we're describing is extreme, the only way you can hold that view is if you put your head in the sand and refuse, and it is a deliberate, willful choice to refuse to see the extremities of our current position. I think that's silly. Right Response Ministries 2025 conference is a go. This is 3 days, full jam-packed conference with 8 main sessions, 3 to 4 hour-and-a-half long panels, and an all-star super-based lineup of speakers, 15 speakers in all. Who are they? Steve Deace, Jeff Durbin, Orrin McIntyre, Stephen Wolfe, Brian Sauvé, Andrew Isker, John Harris, Eric Kahn, A.D. Robles, Dan Burkholder, the Christian Prince himself, Dusty Devers, Ben Garrett, Zachary Garris, David Reese, and yours truly, Pastor Joel Webbon. Again, this is April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. 2025, and the early registration is open right now. This is the longest conference with the most speakers we've ever offered, and yet it is our all-time lowest price. The early registration available today is only $140 for an adult. So go to rightresponseconference.com. Again, that is rightresponseconference.com to register right now, because the early registration will not last long.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's so preposterous when you take a step back and you see how far we've already come, how abusive our government already is, how authoritarian it already is. Like, there's no like figurehead dictator here, but we have like an army of dictators in the various managerial government class. Like, it's so preposterous to not recognize that for what it is, and to not at least even be willing to have the conversation about possible ways out of that. But beyond, you got to believe in the Constitution. You know what I mean? That's what we're saying by that's gone. Like, that's not a workable way out of this. It isn't. So now we know that that's not a workable way out of it. We need to figure out what is the workable way out of it. And to your point about a non-Christian, kind of authoritarian leader, I think that's the most likely scenario to happen, because the amount of people out there that have the ability to do something like that, to sort of really, make positive reforms from the top down, the pool of candidates for something like that is not going to be mostly like regenerate Christians, because
right.
Regenerate Christians have bought the lie that somehow power is antithetical to Christ.
Right.
In general, they bought that lie. You even had I saw somebody say something like a Christian Caesar is just as stupid as saying gay Christian. Like that's completely not correct, but right. He feels totally justified saying it, and he'll get a lot of attaboys and amens because we've bought the lie in general that power is antithetical to Christianity. It's not the case. So in the pool of candidates that are capable of doing something like this, there's much more likely to be someone who has a Christian background and who knows how to use Christian rhetoric and has Christian morality and Christian virtues. That's not, sadly, that's not a legitimate hardcore Christian, because they haven't bought the lie that power is antithetical to Christianity. They don't have that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Wish it was a Christian guy.
Yeah, me too.
I hope so. I mean, that's what I'll pray for.
Amen.
But the most likely scenario, at least the way I see it, is that's not going to be what we get.
And that would be Christians' fault, because we took ourselves out of the running by.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Right,
yeah.
By our pietism, we removed ourselves from a lot of those positions of power, because power, we determined, was icky, and that's really sad.
And it's very sad, and it doesn't have to be that way. And today I put out a little video on Twitter that was basically something like, how do you talk to your friends about these kinds of things? Especially when you got people that are saying stupid stuff like, power is antithetical to Christianity and all this. And to me, like, the easiest way to understand this is to break it down to a micro level, where you have kind of a micro-dictatorship, which is at your house.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I gave an example, like, let's say you and your brother and your sister, you all have kids and you love each other. You're all Christians and you're all hanging out. You're going on vacations together. Everything's great. You have no problem sending your kids to your brother's house for a sleepover. Like, everything's great. And then let's say your sister, she decides to basically leave the faith. She's still says she's a Christian, but, she's transing her kids, she's full LGBT, she's vaccine, crazy, everything, right? Your sister goes off the reservation. as a father, we used to share this understanding with my brother and sister, where we were all kind of like representatives of the house of Robles, and we all kind of did the same stuff. Well, now all of a sudden everything's changed, and now my sister is no longer on the same page with us. And so, as a father, as the dictator of the house, I'm no longer going to have my kids spend time with their cousin, Sam, who used to be Samantha. You know what I mean? Right. I'm no longer going to allow my kids to sleep over at my sister's house, because this is not like I don't have to play by those rules anymore. You know what I mean? I actually do have authority that was given to me by God. I've acquired that authority. God gave it to me. So I have that authority. And so using that authority in these situations is a good and righteous thing.
Right.
I have that authority in the house. And the truth is that authority, God gives authority to rulers as well. And so it's just as legitimate as my authority in their context. And so that is not something that Christians should spurn. In fact, Christians should desire to have that kind of authority, because they know what to do, because they know God's words, they know what God has commanded, they know God's virtues, they know God's limitations, they know all of that. So we should, if we want to do good works in every area of life, like some of us should desire that power and to use that power for righteous causes. But when we don't, the only other option available is for an unbeliever to have that power, because there's no power vacuum. Someone's going to have that authority. God's given it to someone. And so the only other option we have is either an unrighteous, like evil sort of, pagan, or someone who is more restrained in with their evil heart. You know what I mean? That has the right upbringing, that has the right morality, even if they're hypocrites. These are the only options available if Christians spurn that authority, which we should not do. You would never imagine doing that in the home, but I guess some Christians do imagine doing that in the home. They send their kids out to Joe Biden and his army of educational managers to teach. Gosh. So I guess some Christians do, but you shouldn't do that.
Amen. No, I like what you said. It was really good. I like what you said, Adam, particularly with there's no such thing as a power vacuum. Like, power will be wielded. It's not whether but which. So it's there will be power, and it will be wielded in one direction or the other by one party or the other. So someone is going to have. The only question is who will have power, and which way will that power be wielded? But there's no such thing as just a vacuum in the absence of power. And it just made me think of some of oh my gosh, it's so tiresome, the tropes of evangelicals. And again, sadly, it's not even Reformed evangelicals. No, it's especially Reformed evangelicals. Just some of the. If you want to find a place, a magical land, where thought is almost entirely absent, look to the Reformed Church in 2024. It's sad, because I am Reformed, but I have to admit, like, my tribe particularly is just bankrupt of thoughtfulness at this present moment. But my point is, so with evangelicals, and especially Reformed evangelicals, have you noticed this? Using the Boromir with the ring, it is a gift. We should use it, right? The Lord of the Rings, that we should use the one ring, Sauron's ring. And so they'll say, that's what, the woke right, that's what Christian nationalists, want to do, is they're just like Boromir. They want to, they think that you can use the ring. But let's stop. Let's break down this analogy, because it's bad. It's real bad.
It's a terrible analogy.
Let's break it down for a moment and say, okay, so what is the ring in this context? What we're saying, you're saying nobody should use it. Right, so conservatives and Christians, they shouldn't use the ring. They should throw it, in the fires of Mordor. But wait a second. That's with the ring, as it pertains to Lord of the Rings. That is a particular inherently evil power. That's an evil power that should be destroyed. But what we're talking about in this case, the ring would represent not an inherently evil power, but it would simply represent civil power. Well, civil power is God's idea. That's not Sauron's ring. It is a God-ordained institution, the state, the civil magistrate. This is not something that Sauron, it's not something the devil made, it's something that Jesus made. Think about that for a second. We're talking about there will be a civil magistrate. He will have divested within him a certain set of powers. He's either going to be a good guy or a bad guy. He's either going to wield that power in the right direction or the wrong direction. So to use their analogy and to make it more accurate for what they're actually advocating for, this absence of power, and don't do that, because when the bad guys get elected, they'll use those same powers against you. They're already doing that. They're already doing that. So to make the analogy or the illustration a little bit more accurate for some of our conservative, reformed, evangelical opponents who think differently on this issue than we do, it would be like this. It would be like, not just should we not use the ring, but it would be like Gandalf standing up in this council in Rivendell and saying, not only will we destroy the ring, but in the meantime, before we can even get to Mordor to throw it into the fire, also I'm going to forfeit all of my wizard powers. Aragorn, I would like for you to also melt down your sword. Gimli, go ahead and get rid of your axe. We're going to have no power whatsoever. We're all going to forfeit our powers. And you know what I mean? That would be the equivalent of what they're advocating for, and that would be absolutely foolish. What we're saying is that civil power is actually God's idea, and it is inevitable. Right? It is inevitable. It's going to exist. Someone's going to have it. It's going to be wielded in a righteous way, or it's going to be wielded in a wicked way. And so it would be nice if the righteous seized power through ethical means, ways that don't contradict Scripture, and then use that power in a righteous way for the good of the populace, for the good of the public. And so anyway, so that's, I was just thinking about that as you were talking about power. It's going to be there. Someone's going to pick it up. And I think part of the reason conservatives are so good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, that we just lose and lose and lose and lose, is because the group that just wants to be left alone is never going to beat the group that wants to win.
That's right.
Leftist, Marxists, socialists, communists, they're wicked. But as wicked as they are, I've got to give them props. Those guys want to win. Those guys are playing for keeps. And it turns out that the team that wants to win usually ends up winning. Crazy.
Yeah. It is crazy. I know. It's you hit what you aim for. What a shock, But I think, that's another American thing too, because when I was in civics class, and then I went to college and became a libertarian for a little while, my politics was basically like, I just want to be left alone. And that's fine. But the thing is, though, that if you're in politics, that doesn't work, right? So if you want your government to leave you alone, you actually do have to be active in politics all the time. Like it's not enough to just kind of mind your own business as a politician, because there's people that don't want you to be left alone,
right? And
they're going to be doing stuff. And so you have to constantly be using power to good ends in order to get what you want. And
to protect those freedoms. You're right. And with the left alone thing, the libertarians, I keep thinking, they really have set freedom as the ultimate aim. So we want freedom. But guys who make freedom the ultimate aim, I've noticed this pattern. When freedom is your ultimate aim, you tend to be immoral, degenerate. Whereas if you make virtue your ultimate aim, what comes with virtue, if you shoot for freedom, you don't get virtue. If you shoot for virtue, you do get freedom truly defined as the way that God would define freedom. Because a lot of the libertarians, what they want is Second Amendment rights, guns, land, and homos. That, you know what I mean? That's what it comes out to, right? They just elected the libertarian, just chose the libertarian candidate for the Libertarian Party, and the dude's down for trans and kids, right? Because that is, to be fair, that's a true libertarian position. Libertarianism is not synonymous with morality. It's just synonymous with let me do whatever I want, which is not a moral position. We don't want just a population that gets to do whatever they want. We want a population that is being constantly pressed forward towards doing what God wants. We want virtue, and out of virtue will come true freedom. We don't want man's autonomy, a perverted sense of freedom, ultimate freedom to indulge in wickedness that will never lead to virtue, and that's something you don't figure that out necessarily in your 20s. At least me and you didn't. But isn't it funny? Like the older we get, like I feel like you just start to see things differently. And things that you thought were so right. Like libertarianism. I feel like everybody in their 20s, had a libertarian phase, and now it's like, oh, that was dumb. Gosh, I was dumb. You just grow up. So anyways, last thing I'll say is, or that we can say that I would like us to talk about is elite theory, right? Speaking of things that you start to see different when you grow up. So we were talking offline a little bit about this, but for the longest time, this is how I thought. I thought politics is just downstream of culture. Culture is just downstream of religion, theology, faith. And so I thought, it's because the church has compromised in America for decades, and we've watered down preaching and doctrine and faith, religion. Because of that, the culture has degraded. So we've got that produced a worse culture, and then a worse culture, gave rise, to worse politicians and worse politics. So religion, as we compromise there, we got a worse culture that produced worse politics. And I want to be clear, I think that is true. But what's changed for me is I've realized that is not the whole truth. There is a truth to that. That system does happen. That's a reality. But then what I started realizing is this. At the same time, there's another truth, and both are true. There's also elites that are pushing certain agendas. So for instance, I'll just think of this as it pertains to culture and entertainment, media, Hollywood. Was it really that people in the 1950s, right, just the general populace, the majority of the population in the 1950s, that they just started, advocating and saying, you know what, we just want gay sex in movies. We want it. Give it to us, Hollywood. And Hollywood wasn't going to give it to them, but the culture degraded, and then the politics, the leaders, the rulers, the elites, in the political realm and in the entertainment realm, then they caved and said, all right, here's your gay sex. We'll start putting that in movies. Or let's just entertain. I know it's another crazy thought here, but or was it that there were actually elites in Hollywood that wanted all along to push perversion and degeneracy, but the population, the general population, wouldn't have it. And so what they did was they just pushed the boundaries as much as they could, progressively, 1 inch at a time, and that actually shaped the culture. So instead of the culture was bad, and then that gave us bad leaders, is it possible that you have bad leaders who shape the culture into becoming bad? I think to think that doesn't exist is, I just think, a level of just bushy-tailed innocence and naivety that we can't afford in this current cultural moment. Of course there are elites in politics, but not just politics. I'm talking markets, business, economics, Hollywood. We're talking entertainment. We're talking in medicine. In all these different realms, there have been powerful people who have a certain agenda of degeneracy, of progressive wickedness, that have constantly been pushing the boundaries of what's generally acceptable among the public, who have been guiding it. They've been discipling us. They have been discipling the culture towards further and further immorality. And it's you've got to be able to see that.
Yeah, I think that once you really look into this, it is indisputable that is how it went down. And also, but it also can be kind of self-perpetuating. What I mean is, I'll give you a good example, right? Like, me and my wife have been watching Boy Meets World because we both grew up watching Boy Meets World, and we remember it very fondly. And it was the show that we watched and all of that. And I personally remember it being pretty wholesome, and it really isn't. at all. If you go back and watch Boy Meets World now, I think you'll be surprised at there's some degeneracy for sure in that show, and it's presented as fairly normal. There's even a scene where Corey is talking to Sean, and earlier in the show, Sean had like just kind of randomly thrown flowers, and one of the jocks grabbed it, and he was obviously a gay guy. He was happy to get these flowers, and then later he's like upset that Corey says something like he loves Sean as a friend, of course, and he gets all upset. And it's like, I don't remember that kind of stuff when I was a kid. Like there's a legitimate homosexual there who's presented as a normal guy, just a normal jock. Look, people like that do exist, but it's not like something to be like, oh, that's nice. It's so he's feeling jealous. Like, anyway, my point is, you get small stuff like that. It's not a big deal, right? Not that big a deal. But then it just kind of encourages and empowers degeneracy just a little bit. And then then new people get into Hollywood that say, oh, this is something that we can do. Like we can get away with this. And they push it a little bit more. And then new people come in that are more radical, and they push it a little bit more. And then they push it a little more. And then you get shows that are all about how gay people are wonderful and Christians are evil. Like that's the whole point of the show. And so,
and with that,
people
real quick,
have to.
The question is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And what we're saying is, I don't think it was that the general population of the United States was beyond ahead of Hollywood and saying
nobody wanted to see it.
Exactly.
But then they started seeing it.
It's like Will and Grace. Remember that show?
Exactly.
Will and Grace.
That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So like they, it wasn't just like, hey, gay people exist. No. That's not. It was gay people exist and they're wonderful. They're not perverted, and they're just wonderful, and they're silly and they're funny, and that was not when Will and Grace came out. It wasn't that 51% of the population of the United States was saying, you know what we really want to see? We want to see more gay people in television. No, it was Hollywood was saying, you know what you need to see? That's the point I'm making. It's not the general population saying, we want this, and therefore Hollywood gives it to them. No, it's Hollywood saying, we want this, and you need this. There's a destination. We have an agenda. We have a goal. We are herding you like a bunch of sheep towards a particular destination. And here's the next benchmark. And so, just going a little further. And so my whole point is just to say that it's not just that politics is downstream of culture and culture is downstream of religion. There's also something, so it's not just that the church lost its way. The church failed, don't get me wrong. I'm not making excuses for the church. But it's not just the church lost its way, therefore the culture became bad, and then we got bad leaders. Right. Yeah. That's what people, that's your post-war sentiment, 1945 post, modern Western American thinking that says, the culture became bad and then we got bad leaders. No. We got some bad influential people.
Yes.
And they discipled the culture. And here's the deal. If you're wondering, for anybody who's listening, I want to be not unhinged, but I also don't want to be a coward, and I want to be truthful. And just to put a little bit more specificity on this, when we say we got bad leaders and they produced a bad culture, part of what I'm talking about is I am talking about after the war, World War I and World War II, we that's where we got the Frankfurt School. That's where we got certain people came into the country, and a lot of them were Jews. I'm just going to say it. It's just a fact. They came into the country, and they began in a very systematic, designed way to peddle bad ideas into the populace, to shape the culture in a negative way, like Marxism and like degeneracy, like pornography, these kinds of things. And my point is that did affect the world. It's not just that the world got bad just organically on its own, that 1950s housewives, just got together at the pool one day, and decided more gay sex is what we need. Now, that's not how. I honestly feel embarrassed. I can't believe there was a time that I actually thought that's the way the world worked. Because it's not. It's not. You read the Bible, that's not how it works. It's not the people produce a certain kind of leader. No, it's leaders shape people. right? That's the way it works in the church. That's the way that works in with politics. That's the way it works in entertainment. That's the way it works in business. And so in all these ways, if you had righteous leaders, if you had, even with Twitter, I'm not even saying Elon Musk is righteous. I don't think he is. But he's better than Jack Dorsey. He's better than Zuckerberg, better. And just here's a guy who's a multi-billionaire. He takes over a speech platform, social media platform. And what happens? It wasn't just that the general populace in Twitter said, we want more free speech to articulate things on the right. And then they gave it to us. No way. We wanted that. And you know what the overlords in Twitter said before Elon came in? They said, tough luck. Too bad.
Yeah.
Right? But then you get a leader, a new leader, you change leadership, and he says, no, we're going to do this, and you get it. That's the way the world works. And here's the last thing. Anybody who doesn't think the world works that way, they need to understand that that's not just an observation of politics and leadership and elite theory and stuff. That's also, it is a biblical principle. Here's the deal. For all the guys who are all about federal headship, right? Because we know guys, good guys, we love these guys, but they would say, they would make statements like this. Hey, if the family's falling apart, the wife may be to blame, but the husband is responsible, right? So the wife may be sinning, but the husband ultimately is responsible. He's the captain on the ship. And so somebody else under his command could make the mistake, but the captain bears the responsibility. That's federal headship. Well, if that applies for the family, that applies for a nation. It does. So what I'm saying is, because guys will they want to absolve certain groups of influential people from moral responsibility and culpability. And I would say, well, wait a second, you're not doing federal headship, brother. Because in the family, you're the first person to say that if my wife does something terrible that hurts our family, I'm the one who ultimately bears responsibility. Well, all I'm trying to say is at a national level, likewise, the populace can sin just like the wife can sin, but the leaders bear the responsibility. And right now, when you look at the leadership, you see a exponentially overrepresented represented group pushing towards degeneracy. And I want to say that if they are in actual positions of leadership, politically, in terms of media and economically and these kinds of things, then to say that has shaped the country, that federal headship, that leadership actually has affected the country, and that bears a unique responsibility, that's just doing. I feel like that's just thinking biblically. I don't think that's a crazy conspiracy or a crazy position, and to say so you get it. At Private Family Banking, our mission is to help you set up your own privatized banking system so that you can prosper and pass along tax-free wealth to the next generation and teach them to be financially responsible with that wealth. Your system will guarantee positive and continuous growth of your money, income tax protected for the rest of your life and beyond. Additionally, you will create a pool of capital that can be used to grow additional wealth using the same money in more than one place at the same time. For families, investors, and those near or already in retirement, your system will provide a buffer against market volatility to help you avoid selling off your investment portfolio during prolonged market downturns. Now, for those who are struggling with paying off high interest-bearing credit cards or car loans or student loans, there's no worries. We'll teach you how to use your private family bank to accelerate the payoff of your consumer debt, including a monthly step-by-step guide. Turning post-mill thinking into post-mill action with private family banking. Now that's a good thing. Find out how this powerful approach to a multi-generational wealth building can work for you and your family by emailing banking@privatefamilybanking.com. You'll receive a free ebook and a link to schedule your free 30-minute consultation today. Are you a Christian struggling to find companies that align with your values and beliefs? Well, then Squirly Joe's has you covered for all your coffee needs. All of their coffee is hand-selected and roasted fresh every day by a family of fellow believers. Try them out and you'll savor exceptional coffee while knowing that your investment supports a company committed to following God's teachings and upholding truth and righteousness, ensuring that your hard-earned money contributes to the growth of God's kingdom. Stop giving your hard-earned dollars to pagans who support evil. Right Response listeners have access to an exclusive deal. Your first bag of coffee is free. All you have to do is cover the shipping. So head on over to squirrelyjoes.com/right response. Again, that's squirrelyjoes.com/right response to claim your first free bag of coffee today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and I think this is easier to see a lot more these days. I mean, I always. When you get the version of Ghostbusters that comes out with the all-female cast, right? Nobody wants it. Nobody wants it.
Right.
Nobody went to go see it. They don't make money doing it, but they're doing it. And if they were kind of responding to what the people were and what they wanted and what they liked, they would stop doing that kind of thing because they lose money on that stuff all the time. Good point. But they keep doing it. And so it's not going to be surprising when I see the next all-female cast of, I don't know, like Braveheart or something.
Did you see the box office?
I'm not going to be surprised.
Did you see the box office results for the new Mad Max movie? It was like the biggest bomb, I think, in like 30 years. The lowest rating blockbuster film. Mad Max was a massive success in economic terms. They did a new one, except here's the main difference. It's a female protagonist who beats up all the men. And turns out nobody wants to see it. There was a Garfield movie that no one had even heard of that almost topped the Mad Max sequel in the box office. So it's not like, hey, we're doing this because the populace wants it and we want to make money. It's, no, we are want to shape the culture.
And so here's the thing. So, you know, that little Boy Meets World scenario that I told you, again, not a huge deal. It was a little thing. But you see, the thing is, like, Boy Meets World probably didn't lose money on that, you know, especially those days because you didn't know what you were going to get. It just was on Friday and you watched it Friday, right? But they didn't lose. But here's the thing, though, like they're not doing it for the money necessarily, and they don't know how much more people would have loved the show if they hadn't done that, which probably they would have. But they're doing it because they're on an evil mission. They want to push us in a direction where Christians are weirdos and, you know, gay people are abused. They want to tell that story, and it doesn't matter that it costs them something. They want to tell the story where the woman can beat up all the guys and say stupid stuff, you know, about how she's not a man, you know, things like that. I don't know what she said. Who cares?
I don't know. I'm not going to watch it.
They want to push that stuff. And it doesn't really matter if they want to make money. I'm not saying they don't, but it doesn't matter to them if they do or not, because they've got a different agenda. They've got an evil agenda to demoralize people, to promote certain things. That's what they want to do. And they're doing it in every facet of the elite. Every facet of the elite is doing this. In
medicine, in media, in politics. You're absolutely right. In business.
And the thing is, we're all laughing at Mad Max and Ghostbusters and all these kinds of movies and stuff. But the thing is, though, that stuff does actually move the needle. It really does. It does move the needle. And so we can all laugh at it. But in a few years, we're going to get something 10 times worse. And it does speak to especially like younger people who are more impressionable. Like they'll see that stuff and think that it's amazing and awesome. Like even Disney movies where they'll have like the princesses start kicking butt all of a sudden. Right. Like we all laugh at that. It's stupid. You know, we're not going to go see it, but a lot of kids will see it. And the girls are like, oh, girl power. I can do anything a man can do. And then before long, they're transing into a guy or whatever. And it's like, this stuff does move the needle. It's comical and stupid, but it absolutely directs people.
Yep.
Even if it's outlandish too. That's the other thing. People think, well, if it's outlandish, it won't land. It doesn't really fully land, but it pushes the needle of what is acceptable and what is tolerable and stuff like that. So even if no one likes it, they still tolerate it more than they used to.
Right. It provides, even if everybody hates it, then that it's calculated, it's strategic. It's like chess, right? So you're sacrificing a pawn over here. You know it's going to get captured, but you're doing that to so that you can free up a bishop over there for a calculated play. So it's like, okay, so we're going to throw out this play on the left that's way outside the Overton window, and we know that not only are people on the right going to dislike it, but the whole population is going to hate it. Okay, but that doesn't mean it failed. That means that it's a calculated, produced cover fire for this other thing so that it's like the classic good cop, bad cop strategy, right? So like we're going to bring in the bad cop so that the good cop, by contrast, by comparison, looks reasonable. But all that being said, I think this is what conservative Christians need to get. And this is what I've been learning in the last couple of years that I didn't get because of my own ignorance. I didn't see it. But this is what they need to get. I think for the longest time, our response was just laughing and poking fun, because what we thought was, when we thought of the left, we thought these people are stupid. And look, Disney is going bankrupt. Disney is losing money making progressive film after progressive film after progressive film. They're bombing in the box offices. Disney's going broke because they're stupid. And that was not the correct analysis. That's not what it is. No, this is what it actually is. Disney has conviction. And Disney is willing to sacrifice mountains of cash in order to promote their agenda. They're not stupid. They're evil. There's a difference between I'm stupid, losing money on accident because I'm clueless, versus I'm calculated and wicked, and we're willing to lose this money for our ultimate goal. It turns out that some of these companies, as much as they're devoted to capitalism and as much as they're devoted to making money, I've got to tip my hat to some of these leftist companies. They actually care about money less than a lot of companies, conservatives on the right. They are absolutely, it's calculated. It's not an accident. It's not that they're stupid or ignorant or didn't see it coming. They know this movie will not do nearly as well as it could, and we will make less money, and we accept that because our agenda of perverting the nation is more valuable to us than money. They are committed.
Yeah, you can see it. They say it directly sometimes. They'll have like the CEO of Starbucks will say, if you're against LGBT rights, don't drink my coffee.
Right.
Like they're objectively saying, like, don't give me the money if you're not with the program. I mean, but this is the thing. Everyone knows that you are willing to spend money and use money that you may lose for the things that you value. I mean, that's just obvious, right? Like everyone, human beings, that's what they do. And so they value all kinds of degeneracy. They like it. And it's not just entertainment. I mean, this is politicians do this. I mean, lots of people run for office and spend a ton of money trying to do evil things. And they know that they might not win, but they're still willing to do it. This is obvious. This is totally obvious. Yes. The people play a part because we, of course, choose to tolerate certain things. People are led. I mean, that's why the Bible describes us as sheep. Right. We're led. Right. You know what I mean? And if you think you're not, then you're probably the most led person ever. Yep. You know what I mean? Everyone is like this. And so, and even righteous people too. There's a lot of people that I think are legitimate Christians that they'll put their pronouns in their bio when they see other people doing it, right? Because they want to fit in, they want to be nice, and it's not like they buy into the gender stuff, but they do it, and they're easily led by people that have strong voices that tell them this is what we're doing now. It is very rare to have somebody who works at a company and the company says, "Hey, we're all putting our pronouns in our signature." It is rare to find someone that says, "I'm not doing it. You're going to have to fire me if you want me to do it." That's rare. It happens, but it's very rare. Most people will put those pronouns in the bio and they'll be ashamed about it. They'll be embarrassed about it, but they're just not, they don't, I saw in a group chat, I'm not going to say who said it because I don't like to give up names in group chat, but somebody said it perfectly. He said, most men simply lack the testosterone levels to fight. Yes. It's as simple as that. And that is basic. And it's very much that simple. And we can talk about all the reasons why they lack the testosterone to do it. But the reality is that is the case.
Because the chemicals in the water are turning the frogs gay. That's why.
Yeah.
Which I actually do think that that's true. But anyway.
I listen. But this is the thing that's so wild about that, Joel.
Even that's
this is going to be a little bit of a tangent. But you saying that is going to cause all the women in the Twitter feed to be all upset, right? That's the kind of thing that you would say that people would get all over you for.
The frogs turning gay?
And the men, that kind of thing, right? The women and the men that are female adjacent, they all get all their panties in a bunch about that kind of stuff. But they're all proving that they've been losing tea this entire time, because that's something that like Francis Schaeffer talked about in like the 90s. And nobody said, "Oh, Francis Schaeffer, how could you? You're just an evil, bigot." Maybe they did say that. I don't know. I wasn't aware. But like Francis Schaeffer is revered. And he's done content about putting things in the water to do things to us, like not because of our teeth, because of other reasons.
Right.
Like like that kind of stuff. Like if you even float that nowadays, people get all freaked out that our leaders, that no. But this is the whatever the reasons are. Most guys, they'll just go with the flow. They're sheep. And that's it. But the thing is, that's how we all are. And so, like, we need to recognize that as we engage with the world,
You're right. Most people, I mean, it's really simple when you just stop and think about it. It's like, of course, did God create the majority of people to be leaders? That wouldn't even make sense. Like, who would you lead, right? If 51% of the human population is leaders, then everyone is leading one person, and some of the leaders are leading nobody because there's not enough followers. Of course, we know that's not what God did. We know that leaders are rare, right? There are more followers at any given moment than there are leaders. That's just the way that the world works. Of course, that's the way that it works. And everybody is a leader. I get it. Everyone is a leader in a sense that, everyone should be leading themselves, at least self-led, self-governed. At least every Christian, that's, self-government for the Christian is just the fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control. But the reality is that most people, and I won't even speak about Christians, but I'm just saying most of the population, many who are not Christian, are not self-governed right now. They're not leading themselves. They're not self-controlled. And not only are they not leading themselves, well, if they're not even leading themselves, then of course they are failing to lead others. In any society at any given time, you're going to have less leaders and more followers. And so all that being said, my point is, it's not just that the world got together, that the citizens of the United States got together one day and decided, we care about the rights of Ukraine. We care about Palestine. We care about Israel. We care about, Black Lives Matter, or gay pride.
But Joel, and this is what I was trying to say earlier, it perpetuates itself. It's not what happened, right? So they were told that we're all Ukrainian. We're all going to put the Ukrainian flag in the bio, and we're all pro-Ukraine. They were told what to do, and they did it. And now, and this is how it perpetuates itself. Now, people will demand to get a pro-Ukrainian, representative or senator or whatever. And the idea didn't start with them, but now they're running with the idea and demanding it. Right. And so if you're not pro-Ukraine, you're not even electable anymore. Right. Like this is how it works. So it perpetuates itself. And I think partially some of the confusion here is we're seeing the second half of that and saying, oh, you see, the people are pro-Ukraine. It would have been almost just as easy for the state to have said, we're pro-Russia.
Exactly.
Ukraine has completely missed the ball on this one. We're pro-Russia. And even though Putin was our enemy the day before, we probably would be in a situation right now if they just said it and everybody said it.
Right.
If they said,
well, Ukraine is appealing to NATO and wants to, which is,
they're Nazis. It would have been easy to spin it.
There's Nazis in Ukraine. They're appealing to NATO, which poses an immediate threat as neighbors sharing a border with Russia. And they've been putting up all these bases in Ukraine for decades. That has been a threat to Russia. Russia is just protecting. It would have been
easy to spin it that way.
Their homeland. Exactly. So it's not that the Ukraine narrative, the pro-Ukraine narrative was so much more believable. It's you could have spun it either way, easily. And it's not that the public determined that without biases from just a simply, perfectly objective, blank slate. No, our leaders, they saw what was going on before the public ever heard about it, and they determined for their interest that it was better to be pro-Ukraine and against Russia, and then they spun that narrative. And the average person, everybody thinks that we're individual, that we're snowflakes, that we're unique, and that we think for ourselves. You've got to understand that 99% of the population, their position is not individual original thought. Their position is, I support the current thing. What do I put in my bio? Okay, yes, sir. How many rainbow flags? Yes, sir. Ukraine? Oh, switch it to Israel now? Yes, sir. That is the average person. And if so you can't see that, dude, you just don't know what time it is.
And this honestly, this is how most people are. You're 100% right. And this is why, for Christian nationalists, this is why we should have a lot of confidence that things can change much quicker than we think they can. Because we don't need to convince 51% of people that Christ is Lord. We don't have to convince them. We just have to be in the right positions and with the right authority, and to say, okay, here's what we're doing now. This is what we're going to do now.
We just got to be in the right group chat that gets Baron Trump into it, and then begins to it's Inception, right? The movie.
Listen, I'm not going to confirm or deny that Baron Trump is already in our group chats.
Baron Trump, he's an anon. I believe with all my heart that he is an anon on Twitter as we speak. He follows your account. He follows mine. He's seen what the world has done to his father and how they have betrayed him and wronged him. And he's sitting there practicing playing, Age of Empires, on his computer and stuff, honing his warlike skills, and he's going to rise to power.
I think people would be surprised if you found out the kinds of people that we're talking to and that are following us and stuff like that. And it's very easy to mock Christian nationalism as a small movement. It's fringe. Nobody cares. And as far as I'm concerned, they can keep doing it. But it's not going to take much, man. It's just going to take one or two key spots.
That's right.
And some of those things are already in the works. And
you're right.
Listen, this is we should have a lot of, this is how people are, for better or for worse. This is the reality of the situation. Most people just go with whatever we're doing now. And, I can even people say, oh, nobody's going to stand for your Christian theocracy. That is not the case. Yep. I mean, I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with regular people that are unbelievers, right? That I know would be with us if we said, Christ is Lord, and we're not going to go for this degeneracy anymore, and we're going to put a stop to this LGBT madness.
Oh, yeah.
I know so many pagans that this is the calculus. I think I've told you this before, Joel, where I'm talking to someone. This is someone I know well. I know what he believes. And he'll go off on some rant about some gay thing in school, and he'll say something like this. This is actually almost word for word. He's like, yeah, he's cursing. You take prayer out of school, and, this is what you end up with. You end up with tampons in the men's room. And
right.
And you look at him, you're like, how does this guy get it? And I know what he believes. Right. He gets it. He gets the connection. You can't tell me that there are not thousands and thousands and thousands of people just like him that are they know they're unbelievers. They don't believe, but they make these connections, and they would be absolutely with anyone who said, look, Christ is Lord. There's no more tampons in the men's restroom. As simple as that.
Yep.
They'd be with it.
Yep.
If they canceled every gay pride parade, they'd be with it. Right. If they started enforcing, enforcing decency laws against the pride parades, they'd be with it.
Yep.
They'd be supporting it, and maybe they don't even know why, but they make the connection, and they'd be with it. They're not worried about us saying Christ is Lord. They should be worried about that, but they're not. And so they'd be in full support. This is the thing, we should have a lot of confidence, you know what I mean? Don't let anyone blackpill you and thinking, oh, there's only 10 of you and stuff like that. It doesn't take a lot of people.
That's right, because things can change. God sometimes takes forever to do something suddenly, and things can switch, right? The vibe shift, the winds can change, the tide can change overnight, because because what we've been saying this whole episode, the majority of people, the reason why things can change so quickly is because the majority of people are followers. They're not leaders, which means that you don't have to change the minds of 330 million people. All you have to do, right? You were saying these guys could hop on board, right? These pagans and atheists and, could hop on board. And all it would take, this is what it would take, is not just us having the right position, but the right people, strategic, influential people adopting that right position. And then back to, C point A, we're not going to name any names. But, Barron Trump, that was a bit of a joke, although, I don't know, who knows? Maybe he is an anon following somebody's account. But you're absolutely right. Without sharing, too many details or names, it is a fact that people, massively influential people, high up, and it's not just that we have a speculation. No, they are calling us, texting us. Hey, I saw what you posted on Twitter. I think that's really good. Hey, I watched your podcast. I think that's really good. I'm talking massive celebrities, million, if not billionaires. You can keep patting yourself on the back and consoling yourself. Christian nationalism will go away. It will go away. It won't. You might as well go ahead and get with the program. Jesus is Lord. That's a good thing. Let's be happy about it, and let's get some work done. Any final thoughts for this episode?
No, man, this has been fantastic. Thanks for inviting me again. I appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, I have something to talk to you about. Someone on Twitter was asking, very antagonistic to you, and asking if I'm a paid shill of you. So, and they're suggesting that I should be paid for my board work on Right Response. And so we in a talk. No,
all right. You're not a paid shill, but I can see why you would want to be.
Anyway, man, God bless you. Man. This is great.
You too. Bye.